Good morning. This is November 20th, making another exploration to present the over 50 years of experience in the area of psychology, and more importantly, in the area cross-cultural or multicultural areas of my study and research about human psychology, and it's moving from now the study of psychology into the communication area. As I have started since February this year, and in the use of the entire 12 months as an experiment in the use of the technique, we have now a technology with the video. Basically, we are coming back. We're heading back into the era of oration, orator, and if you think about how the Greek history, Greek mythology was written by Homer, and he was in between the time when before the written language was ever established. So narration, narrators, and use of the scribers to write about their experience and sharing their experience. And this is, again, we are repeating the cycle or history of presenting stories and events told verbally. But now we have the new technology under, I call this new environment, I use constantly. What is the cultural sphere I'm in? Because if I'm speaking Chinese with my Chinese ethnic groups, that's another cultural sphere. And then Portuguese and Spanish and Italian and English, depending of the cultural zone, the audience that I'm engaged. And in this particular time and point, what have enhanced the future engagement of writing, narration, description have all been impacted by this twin cultural spheres, which I have created a name for, AI at present and IT in between. I call it ITAI, ITAI. In Portuguese, where I grew up and where I become very endeared to the country of Brazil, which is basically having it's my second home from home. And Itai, Ita, ITA, meaning stone, in the Tupi-guarani language of the native, the dominant native tribe in the region on the East Coast. So Itai is just kind of using it to remind everybody else, this is the era of IT, AI. And also in the Portuguese expression of it, the way we exchange, idai, what's going on? If you're telling a story and people are eager to listen to what happened. So itai. I'm trying to use in my another series of sequence of word I use about culture. Number one, in 2008, when I spent 6 weeks in the upper Amazon region, in the Rio Negro, and in the city of São Gabriel de Cachoeira, visiting my old school friend, Don Song, who has become the bishop of the parish in the region of São Gabriel de Cachoeira. 35 native tribes, with the known tribes like Tucano, which is living around the Colombians, Venezuela, and also Brazil. And the other more distant, still having representation in the region, is the Yanomamis, the Pare, and where they have created a language, a common language, years back called Ningatu. And this is part of the interest that brought me up to that region to visit Bishop Song, who become known in the Brazilian history as the Bishop of the Indians, the natives. and we both share the very similar background and transitions from both born in Shanghai, raised in, he was in Hong Kong, I was in Macau, and then we moved to Brazil. Then we met up in Lorena, in the halfway point from Sao Paulo to Rio, a town where the school was created by the Salesians, ordered from Torino, Italy. That common education that we have both shared in Asia and Brazil and continued on. But in this particular timing point, I picked up a mandate in the sharing of some of the educational programs with the parish, with the parishioners, and the team of the sisters and nuns who carry on most of the education. And the weekend there was a assembly of the indigenous from different villages by the river banks. They came down from this festival of Saint Anne, or not until then, I don't even know, as a Roman Catholic, that the Mary, the mother of Christ, is her mother's name was Anne. But it was a lot of festivity, a lot of celebration. And so in the midst of that, there was the training, or a part of educational program, receiving new ideas or new mandates from Rome. And it was interesting that Sister Philomena put me on a spot, telling the 100 plus missions that I will be interpreting, explaining what Rome just sent to Brazil and to the indigenous region with two words. In Portuguese called enculturação, E-N, and then inculturação with I-N. Then in English, we're going to say the enculturation, meaning education, foster learning. Enculturação is a little bit of an introspective way of learning. I think this is a part of the reconciliation, awakening within the Roman Catholic Church to encourage the local natives to look back also about their heritage and the past knowledge about the environment, such as the many medicinal elements among the trees and vegetations, where hundreds, if not thousands, Europeans, explorers, and even when I was in that region, many of the NGO came. But like everybody else, they have their own young man's curiosity, language, and whatnot, and plus a huge amount of curiosity seeking. You talk about the size of the bird, the spider that can jump almost 3 feet to capture prey birds. The jungle is absolutely fascinating. It was the 6 weeks I remained where I become more enculturated, not just by the indigenous living habit and the social and psychological cultural environment, and also where I have getting greater exposure, and I myself learning with my readiness of preparation in the cultivation in the field of cross-cultural psychology and within the field of counseling psychology. All this have the great impact. And also along the way, I have a wonderful mentor, Padre Osvaldo Capianci, and who have given me many of the indications in downtime, in my own study time, watching videos, watching films and tapes about Darcy Ribeiro, which is one of the best-known Brazilian cultural anthropologists, who had once I heard he said, we do not having a past old cultural anthropology. We have a living cultural anthropology. And then the more emphasis, the more films and books about Paulo Freire, who had get me even greater alert of the word conscience. Paulo Freire had used the word called the conscientização, or the conscientization, is almost putting the conscience into an active mode. And that by the way he advocated the conscience awareness or conscience education. And here comes the core value where I will be dedicating by creating between now December, I will try to produce somewhere along with 5, 6, 7 hours a continuous videos in the use of YouTube, and then I'll break down eventually into every segment by the insertion of the pictures relating of the subject matter. So with the continue on the influence of Brazil, my exposure to the Portuguese language, with the influences reading about Darcy Ribeiro, Paulo Freire, and also from literature, Jorge Amado. All in all, this collective experience with the engagement in the use of Portuguese language, with the total exposure, with my 45 years of the engagement with the gemstones and minerals and specimens, continue. I was furnished by all the rich elements of Brazil, from language to culture to economics to business, and so this particular time and point, I have reached a certain level about the integration of my research starting 1974-75, when I have developed a counseling system. I have named it 3C, all in the integration between psychology and communications. The first C is called Communication Dynamics. The second C is called the Communication Analytica. It's basically the system to analyze the communications that have taken place between my students, the people that I do counseling with, and myself. But with the framework, converting the transactional analysis, the 6 spheres, with the listing the parent, adult, and child interaction, and I have adapted into the system of a CA, Communication Analytica, by modifying the round and in the use of input of the square shape, round shape, and then half of the square is a triangle. And some 45 years later, 5 years ago, just about 2020 or 19, during the time and incoming of the COVID, I have this integrated into a system within the system of the 3C counseling system, the psychology round and square, because the dynamics that I was adapting from the transactional analysis, Eric Burns' 6 sets of round circles, into modification with the square, which is the 2 basic cultural framework now coming from the side of Chinese. Because in the Chinese cultural zone, if you look at what is the most basic, what is the most common of the Chinese culture, is always about the round and square. The sky is round, air is round, so the sky atmosphere is round, and the horizons indicating our limitation in seeing the horizons and the land with the line representing, meaning that is the square. The interplay of these two dynamics, round and square. And take example, many people learn about Tai Chi, many people learn about martial arts, and subconsciously, not knowingly, you are basically applying the same principle of the round and square. I used to play, I say I play, the Taekwondo in Brazil. I was very athletic. Sports, I was a swimmer. And also I played basketball, I played football in my boarding school, and which had advanced me to various levels. And in and between training time, I had the exposure with the Korean teacher in my team, my club team, and basically we were sharing the same comment about starting with the discussion of the philosophy, the value, the sign of the Tai Chi, and then we talk about round and square. And basically, when you are moving, the round is very mobile. The square is where you know your limitations. In the same application about Taekwondo, and where I also have the exposure with the people from Rio, with the students who know about capoeira, which basically people know this about as a foot fight. And capoeira can trace back to its origins, the different interpretations. And in Africa, they call it Angola, which is the country named Angola. But Angola actually was, they meant by as a zebra, and with the back kicking of the horses. The relating capoeira into the region of the Taekwondo with the Asian martial arts, and now the Afro-Brazilian art plus fighting skills is almost a show and exhibit, because you accompany with a beating bow with two-string musical instruments. So the movement is almost dance, but in any 1 second, the roundhouse kick, the spinning wheel, the windmill kind of movement by the using of the foot. So what happens that is a defense offense. When you're throwing a kick, you turn around. When your opponent might thought you were vulnerable, they move the face into that zone. But because your measure of a perfect round kick, you can attack your opponent into the facial, in whatever context spot. These are basic rules and values about the martial arts, and how that applies to the usage relating to the round and the square. Okay, and half of the square in my counseling field, what I developed, is the triangle. When you and I get along, it's round and round in round oval ambience. The square is where we become a little bit puzzling. We're thinking, we're estimating. It doesn't have to be harmonious or not harmonious, but you created doubt, puzzle, and hesitation, and waiting for the next judgment. That is the square. So you can be square and square, or can be round and square, because this person who may be speaking on his or her events not aware of your thinking pattern, and put both together, and the cultural sphere is square. And come to the next segment. If this disagreement increases, disharmonies in the atmosphere of confrontation or discussion, argument intensifies, that's basically half of the square is two triangle pointing at each other. Well, no more than need to about the atmosphere. There's already an atmosphere, hostility, unfriendly, and so on and so forth. I think this development, the basic description of by the verbal skills, by the communications, and set them into the ambience of also round, oval, square, and the two triangle, had allowed me expand this into the psychology of round and square. So today, yesterday, the system of the PRS, psychology round and square, plus the 3C counseling system is fully established with very simple use and application for all people. And this is what has arrived today, yesterday, after many years of the contemplation. In looking at the amount of counselors required or request or the demand just in the state of Wisconsin is 13,000 people. How many counseling clinics, how many master degree, like what I have, can become counselors? Some are under the supervision of a psychiatrist or psychologist, which is just very, very uh, very fair and very prudent to have a system. And again, this allowed me to reflecting back to the history of psychology. Let's be grateful to Pavlov, or the Pavlovian conditioning response, and the operating conditioning in the early part about how we respond to stimuli, how we respond to the rewards, and like loving candy and not disliking pain, the very basic conditions. And with the Freudian, because I'm in a cross-cultural zone, many things we have in life are borrowed, unbeknown to us. The world has always been a very much of a borrowing of different resources and languages to make our life more livable. Sigmund Freud has a great contribution to the field of psychology. Psyche, psyche, is coming from an image of a Greek mythology, a nymph, a young maiden sitting by the pond and looking back on the reflection. Right there, reflection, introspection, all about thinking. The psychology is the study and analyzing the human mind to the best way we know how before it becomes a science. Psychology and Freudian psychology extracted from the time of the Greek mythology. I'm not here to criticize or put a positive or negative, but the Greek mythology, from their forming, even use the word chaos, and with all the multiple deity and the multiple sexual activities, representing a time and an era when the earth were young, 5,000, 6,000 years ago, or 10,000. That situation of the Greek mythology had given Freud the language to talk about the intimacy of physical touches between the mother and the son, talk about Oedipus complex. And then we talk about they have to create electro complex, which is the opposite part of a young girl, the relations with father. This may seem all to be very complicated, but I'm glad as a pioneer with Freud creating the theory of psychoanalysis and also his psychosexual dynamics had given the world a little bit of a point of references where the human anxiety come from. What we are dealing, to make it very simple, we're dealing with human anxiety. And this sort of anxiety can come into many, many forms, um, such as my wife would not enjoy a ocean voyage where I have left from Hong Kong to Brazil at age 13 and 14 with a 60 days, 45 days voyage, crossing over 3 oceans and continents, and went from Asia to Indian Ocean, Africa, and then to Brazil. And there are people who doesn't like height. There are people who have developed certain kind of a phobia. Phobia is a little more intense than just fear. There are many reasons why we have produced anxiety. When we're young, teenagers, first time socializing, going to the crowd, learning how to dance and how to become part of the group, all this socialization, all part of our learning to adapt to a new cultural zone. Again, from a teenager, pre-puberty, to the time of interesting dating other people or engage with the opposite sex, is all part of the personal cultural development. And that's how I take it, because I have applied myself by the early exposure with the 2, 3, 4 Chinese dialects, all spoken to me at the same time. The dialect from my father and my paternal grandmother, which is from the city, a town called Yuyao in Zhejiang, 2 days next to Ningbo. Then we were in the city of Shanghai with all the staff, maid, servant speaking Shanghai, and from also different regions, Pudong and Suzhou. I have a wet nurse, and my mother was Cantonese, and she grew up in the region called Guangxi, the province next to Guangdong. Dong means east, Xi means west, Guang means broad. So Guangdong is a broad area from the east. Guangxi is a broad area from the west. And my mother speaks the language, local dialect of Guangxi. She also spoke the official language called Guanhua, or the official language of the court. Today, we call it Putonghua. But each one and every one of us have our accents, have our local dialects, and that's very simple. Move your movement of the mouth, your tongue, and the all the diphthong, all the tonality of a language make us learning more again, but then become less perfect sometimes in a specific fluency of a language. And then my mother tongue was Cantonese. And my father also was a graduate from Paris, from Sorbonne. So in our lifelong experience from Shanghai to Hong Kong, Macau, which my father left in 52, we joined my father 10 years later in 62. And in that new ambience, speaking Portuguese, speaking French, with the Lebanese associates, my father's partners were Asians, Chinese from Burma, Chinese from Thailand, but in business together in Brazil. And so they speak Portuguese very fluently, the easy adaptation, but also amongst them, they speak French, and plus their spouses. So language had an early impact, or what I credit is my early hearing skills. Maybe the young mind as an infant, you search for the sound and voices, trying to make meaning of it. I credit my 52, 62 year, the period growing up in a Portuguese colony in Macau, were baptized Roman Catholic by the Jesuits, by the famous mission, the Jesuit mission named Matteo Ricci. And history will give Matteo Ricci much greater credit in the cross-cultural period and time of his life, which is very interesting, by creating a map, the first global map, maybe half from the European side, Italian side, and then the Chinese, and how the map by the not Matteo Ricci, by Polo, the Polo family had given that to Columbus, and in theory Columbus was from Genoa, and his brother was a cartographer, map maker, but they happened to be moved into Portugal, and he has a wife from Portuguese, and then the whole the whole dynamic about the discovery of America, we're all part here about the cross-cultural mix, the mezcla, the mistura, I call it the salada mista in both Portuguese and Italian and Spanish. All this is creating clusters of informations, and these information handlers had created the voyages just going heading into the Americas. But the discovery of America alone, looking back with a different lens, you would discover there are many the trade secrets. Was Columbus ever Italian? That does not seem to be the case. I highlight this because with this story about the discovery of the Americas has a lot of myth to it. And Columbus, according to one or two or three of the writing about Columbus, was actually Portuguese. Just by the way he traveled, he found Antilles of the islands Hispaniola, today Dominican Republic, and also hosting Haiti. And then when he discovered Cuba, and he named all the outer islands with the name of the saints. And by this point, by my observation at this point, we also have discovered there's a city and a town in the province called Alentejo, also named Cuba. It's a Roman origin name. And that's where Columbus was born. Columbus supposedly is a bastard child of one of the nobilities called Count Beja and his mistress, or converso with the Judaic heritage, Zarco, Catalina Zarco, and her father, Columbus' grandfather, is one of the discovery of the island of Madeira, of all the Portuguese navigation fleets under Prince Henry, located in Sagres, which is the southern part near the area called Algarve, the warm climate area of Portugal. And the history of this Portuguese navigation, even the forming of the nation of Portugal, were actually having a double impact with their religious order called the Order of Christ, and also by the defecting the Knights Templars. So the flag is a white cross onto a bigger cross. And that means the double the Order of Christ and double the Templars religiosity, and they all make vow to secrecy. The secrecy of maritime travel, of instrumentation, compass, and the reading of the latitude, longitude, all this, the Portuguese had basically mastered that part of the skill, and their use of the adaptation of the ship called caravels, or the caravels, were speedy, steady, much more about this that you can explore, we can share eventually. But by 1460, the Portuguese already traveling through this west coast of Africa, were already down to cities like Lagos in Nigeria, present-day Nigeria, meaning Greeks. They were already in part of the Guyana, of the Portuguese named African continent called Guinea. And from that part of the Portuguese, they have already gone across the Atlantic and finding or have colonies settling in the island called Tristão da Cunha, an island where I traveled through at age 14 from China to Brazil when the islands already started to sink, 1962, around October. And we stopped by to pick up throwing nets off the boat to pick up 3 British scientists. And then eventually the Portuguese travel up north to the northwest, finding Fernando de Noronha, the island closer to Brazil. And according to the literature that are being reviewed, that Portuguese had already gone up to that part of Antilles, the section where Columbus had found for the Spanish, and, and with hypothesis that Columbus basically is a spy for King John II of Portugal. They want to mislead the Spanish into the region of the Antilles so that they can protect their bigger landmass in Brazil, South America, and also securing by way of the ruling of the Pope of Vatican to secure the exploration south of the Canary Islands. Also was found by the Portuguese, but forced to have given to Spain because they were much more powerful. And the Pope Borgia, Paul VI, also come of the Spanish origin. There's many gossipy, seems to be gossipy, but there were many evidence of that interplay between Portuguese navigation and Spanish. But eventually, Spanish ambition and vision to take the Americas and then force their way traveling to the South America, find a passage into eventually the Guam and Philippines, was the voyage by Fernando Magallanes, English known as Magallanes. As we will find out, many of the navigation all originated for the 1450s, 60s of the school of the Prince Henry, the navigation school in Sagres, southern Portugal. So history often is not just what we see or being told, the narration by the court history. I found history as in the long history of the Chinese, what they call the wild stories or the off the main track stories and commentaries has just as much validity or more information than the recorded history. And that's what China had advanced by the 3,300 years and more of the written records of every single dynasty. I point out the 3,300 is by the creation when we discovered the oracle bones written on animal bones and tortoise shells. And these oracle bones now are appearing also in North America. So by this particular history, as I'm aiming to work my cross-cultural life, my cross-cultural education, and my input into the cross-cultural psychology from the development of the 3C counseling system, now added from that field, I extracted and discover is much simpler to using the psychology of round and square. Psychology today, by just what I have reviewed from one state, Wisconsin, the number of people seeking counseling services is immense. If you look at this is the demand and the product. If we use only from the traditions of using psychiatrists and licensed psychologists, and their time frame is between 12 to 14 years from doctoral degrees, right? That is going to be not being able to support the demand of people with anxiety, where anxiety can produce the disconcerting, quote unquote, psychosis, losing touch with reality. And then the minor symptoms, still using the classical terms, called neurosis. And with the development, what I'm aiming at, the number of counselors today is much easier. You can do online, you can do Zoom, you can do Google Meet, you can have much of this practice no longer blocked by the physical location, which is marvelous, which is great. And my personal experience as an educational psychologist in the field of guidance and counseling, in 1974-75, I was already advocating for more master degree counselors to be licensed to practice counseling. Of course, every counselors, every group of counselors must have their supervision or having access to the services of a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist, because that's where time and the need to prescribe medication, if the anxiety level is so high and the behavior become to changing to a more of intrusive behavior, or imposing to other people within the community or within the compound. And so as of yesterday, I have conceived this idea. It's no longer the creating the counseling professionals alone, not only counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists. This will continue, as they are right now very much in demand. But the country, the national change, we can put the overall psychological awareness on the learning of human psychology to the public. Yes. In my creation of the 3Cs counseling system in 1974, 75, and 76, and that was precisely what I have created and developed, a language skill suitable for all. Because in the use of visuals, images, to understand, if you and I are in this round sphere, be that we're shaking hands, we're saying hello. In Latin America, among the Arabics, we hug, we kiss on the cheek. It is the whole round shape, round and round. In the ovalized round, we get along. The square and the triangle will have the other aspect of the psychological and mental status. And today, by us also grasping that we have 60,000 stimuli, emission and intake daily, these are all into the nanosecond count in our psychological, in our way use of thinking. Maybe we're talking wonderfully, all of a sudden the chill wind came in, is affecting the ambience environment. But this is just, we're talking about in general. But I think ever since you can, starting with the kindergarteners to high school to college and beyond, and using the term guidance and counseling, and in the use of my development of the images, which can be very easy to learn and very simple to involve your time, expand this body of knowledge. In other words, the awareness of psychological being of anyone can be put into a cultural ambience and can be taught by all professionals. If all teachers having some sort of a counseling awareness and skill, beyond just the verbal side of it. Oh, you get in trouble, talk to the counselor. The counselor say, all right, this is beyond my level of comprehension, because your behavior seems to be more troublesome. Then they go to the psychologist, and from psychology, eventually, whatever the development, can go to the psychiatry. I think This is just one element of my observation. Also, in this past 10, 20 years, ever since the mass murder took place in Colorado, the school killing in the East Coast now happened in Texas, and the gunman who killed 64 people in Las Vegas. All this crisis is starting the demand of the trauma counseling and to level the anxiety status of many citizens who were impacted by the events, by many cruel, gruesome situations with master killing by guns. So speaking of the North America alone, these are the visual signs of crisis. Now we have COVID. And that COVID had impacted many, many families and many people, their social well-being, as well as their economic well-being, such as losing employment, company closing down, restaurant closing down. We are coming to a time by real situations and by the lack of trained counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, and the number of the anxiety raised by the many events. Take example, we don't have to go any further. Look at the post-trauma events in Gaza. If there's a future in Palestine, I came to college in 1967, and we were faced with the many, many returnees from Vietnam. And imagine, I was doing counseling work with many of these veterans, and their connection at first, in a very naive state, I said, would they resent me because I'm Asian, maybe in Vietnam? But by my discovery, many of this anxiety, many of this problem with the returning veterans, there was not much to do with the daily contact or confrontation or shooting with the engagement with the Vietnam. Many were in their own mindset, their shelter. I have a student that had traveled in 3 years, 18 missions by flight from North Carolina to the DMZ just to recover the downed helicopters or planes. And he had never met one Vietnamese. And every mission, they bring out, if people were killed, they bring out their body bags. They just go in to remove the black box, whatever secrets for the military. Imagine in 3 years, 18 missions, flying 24 hours plus directly from Carolina, landing in the DMZ. He had hardly met one Vietnamese. This is the kind of a technical war and the level of pressure with the amount of happening. So the more I am involved with this, with the study of the cross-cultural exchanges, the more about the human anxiety and what are the causality of the people's anxiety. Also allow me to reflecting back of my life from the early part of exposure, born in Shanghai, lived there for 5 years, always spoken a predominantly Shanghai dialect. And then my mother had me removed because I was under the wet nurse. My mother could not provide milk for me. And they fled to Hong Kong in 1949. And then I rejoined the family in a way is almost a comic story, from smuggling out of China into Macau and rejoining the family and continue with the Cantonese. Indirectly, we were refugees. We're running away from the conditions of China. We're living in a place in Macau when I was 5, 6 years old, where the my living quarter, my two aunts, servant, my two sisters, my brother, my mother, we were warned by the people in Macau, do not let the youngsters alone out in the streets. There was still certain kind of professionals who will kidnap children of that age, 5, 6, 7, up to 10 years old, and they fetch a good price to ship the people into, even without knowing what Luzon was the Philippines or Indonesia or in Malaysia. That links now into another story of the Chinese migrants heading into Southeast Asia after the war, looking for opportunity, or before the war. The Chinese diaspora going all the way back to the later part of the Song Dynasty, when they had to flood north, coming down further south to the region of the Yangtze River, Shanghai, Hangzhou. In that region, and other had fled further south to Guangdong, Canton in those days. And the people, like different ethnic groups, like the people from Hakka. And so I just barely remembered the how nervous my aunts and the servant watching us very carefully in fear of the sort of a kidnapping, because at a certain age we can be trained by this Chinese immigrants left China long ago. Now they are established their business. They want to capture a youngster who can be still speaking their language, their dialect. These Chinese immigrants, the more I read about the story by way of another Silk Road on the seaside, on the Pacific region, about the Spanish Empire in the Philippines, about the island landed by Magellan or Fernando Magallanes, and the Chinese settlement in the outside city of Manila, and their contribution and their traffic with the silver coming in from the Spanish Empire by way of Peru, but the silver come from the present-day region of Bolivia called Potosi. And that is a huge exchange, because in that time and period of the Ming Dynasty, the silver become a national currency, and the demand of silver, well, we can, with the big data and AI, we can eventually retrieve the data from all the ships, how much brought in from Potosi, Peru into Mexico, from the port of Acapulco. 70% of the silver production had gone into the galleons called Manila galleons, 6 months travel, carrying passengers up to 500 in a crew of 200. And this galleon come by the motion in the southern part of the Pacific into the Philippines, and then come returning from the further north to Japan, and then going to the coast of then California. And not to forget, the Spanish Empire at that time, it was up controlling the territory of Oregon, New Mexico, California, Texas, Arizona, Nevada. Why Nevada? The name Nevada is Spanish. Nieve means snow. Nevada is when the conquistadores or the Spanish look up to the mountain were covered by snow, from the Sierra Madre, from the Rocky Mountain region. So in short, looking back to one history about myself in Macau at a certain age, and that had led my mother to have us all baptized Roman Catholic, and then having us to send into boarding school by the order named Salesianos, or the school formed by Giovanni Bosco, in Portuguese, Don Bosco with an M, and then in Spanish, Don Bosco. The journey of linguistic supplement, additional language during the Macau. As refugees, not knowing that we're refugees, we're not poor, we have provision, we're money. Um, our focus is from Macau heading into eventually Brazil. But we're in Macau, we went to the boarding school. We never even give any thoughts looking back or into the future. Will we be back to China? We are looking into learning English, being engaged with the Roman Catholic Church, with the Jesuits, with great orientation, guiding us into the Salesian schools, and we attended boarding school. Thinking back, even with my sisters lamenting, oh, we were cruel, because you two of you are very, very naughty, very rambunctious, we're like your monkeys. Well, that's how Monkey King becomes so popular, because when we're naughty, we're told to be monkeys. But on the contrary, in the boarding school, when you have the space to play, when you have friends you share the dining room, ate to the table, you follow this very similar rituals. Nobody was conditioned to be baptized, become Roman Catholics. Many of my friends today who attended the same school were never Catholics. But that set of conditions, again, thinking back, reflecting back into history, what Macau become a time and period that you're starting to acquire the foreign language, such as English was mandatory in one of the courses. And then with the service of Mass as an outer boy, the exposure to Latin is another fascination, for me anyway. And more than that, when you can sing the Latin language into the Gregorian tone, you accentuate the language all about the movement of your mouth, your tongue, bocal, B-O-C-A-L in Portuguese means. So what happens in you singing the Latin in the Greek melody, sound, such a word like Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, your movement and the delay of the sound give you become much more tuning into the language. You can accentuate. This is all the fascination about how I get exposure from the listening sounds, the multiple tone language dialects in Shanghai, and back to Macau with another multiple language exposure into Latin, Greek, English, Portuguese, and Chinese. And trust me, I left Macau 62, 13, 14. We never speak a word of Portuguese. But the minute we landed into Brazil and loving Brazil and the exposure of Brazil, what I have learned, acquired in Macau with the pronunciation of the A, E, I, O, U, Latino, Portuguese, it comes very natural. And so I'm really thankful sometimes this part of life has become very fatalistic. In that fatalism kind of idea, I become Arabic. But I have a choice. By learning in history, I become an Andalusian Arabic, the dance with flamingo, that with the music, with the musicality, with the horses. More so when I start riding horses in Brazil, in my own mining company, I have my own manga larga, the Andalusian, we call it machador. We become distinguished. What was a good horse, how stable, and how all that, and the contribution of the linguistic exposure, languages and culture. I joke around that in my next life, I want to become a flamenco dancer. Only in southern part, Moorish Spain, Andalusia. All this kicked in the imagination had previously registered by the phone, by the phonic, by the sound, by the intonations, the Chinese, the French, the Portuguese, Latin, Greek from Macau expanded into my state in Brazil. And so making my Brazilian learning Portuguese speaking languages and the coexistence with the wonderful spirit of the Brazilians. And I'm lucky. I'm very lucky. Maybe I have the mindset to record all my past language tonal experiences and the engagement now into psychology, where I think the language of psychology and the awareness of the psychology and the education of psychology can be very, very well expressed in the use and the expressions and images I have created in 1974, 75, 76, called the 3 C's. And I will continue to expand this chat. And I may even have a little bit of the audacity to do a 3, 4, 5 hours of tape, and then to reproduce into a video form, accompanied with the right image and the right icons of this live experience in the areas cross-cultural life, cross-cultural psychology, and now the incoming PRS, psychology of round and square, and the 3C counseling system. Thank you for your time.